Now Susan Rice is criticizing the Trump administration for trying a different strategy while warning that a preemptive attack would be a terrible idea.
What I worry about is this discussion and preparation potentially for what the administration has called preventive war or preemptive war, which would envision the United States potentially attacking North Korea in the absence of an imminent or actual threat against the United States. Deterrence makes good sense. That's very essential for us to maintain, and obviously we don't ever take off the table the threat of the use of force. But preemptive war, if one were actually thinking of executing that, would be catastrophic.
Susan, I nearly walked out of the room there. Susan, the great Tammy Bruce is with us. I've got to say this, Tammy. You know, Susan Rice is, and people like her, are the reason we're at this point. For 24 years, the Susan Rices of this world have told us there's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to worry about. Now suddenly she says, oh, it's a nuclear North Korea, we got to live with it, get over it.
Yeah, this is like the arsonist telling you to not put out the fire because it'll be too dangerous.
Right.
Look, everybody knows Susan Rice, of course, has a history of really being a pawn, if you will, of saying things that are not true about international affairs, certainly with Benghazi.
Right.
And this is why President Trump is the president. Right. We get it. It's astounding to me, though, that they still are present, speaking as though they've been dropped in from Mars and had nothing to do with the last 8 years.
Right.
And I think, though, that the president is focused in this regard, and I understand everybody's got opinions about the nature of what's occurring here, but I can tell you this, and what had a big impact, and we know it did on President Trump, is Otto Warmbier.
Right.
So if we're going to be speaking about whether or not Kim Jong-un is reasonable and if we can live with a nuclear North Korea, the answer to that, of course, is no. And I think that if we remember the nature of what they did to that young man, sent him back almost as a slap in the face after they killed his brain. These are crazy, maniacal, genocidal individuals who exist in a very interesting way in a sort of religious dynamic, as the Islamists do, with the one family being, of course, worshipped in a religious way. And I think that there's a recognition to that when it comes to issues of death and resurrection and all of that.
Yeah, they do. Otto Warmbier, just to remind people, he was a U.S. citizen who was basically questioned to death by that regime, and then, as you say, shipped back
because he took a banner. He was trying to, like, getting a souvenir, and they tortured him to death.
You brought up Susan Rice's record on Benghazi. Isn't the choice for the basket case states of the world, do you want to be Kim Jong-un or do you want to be Colonel Gaddafi? Colonel Gaddafi cooperated with us after the Iraq invasion. He gave up his weapons of mass destruction, and he did what the West told him to do, and for his pains he died very violently in a ditch in the bloodiest way, chased out of his presidential palace and with his regime collapsed. If you do what Kim Jong-un does, they can't give you the Gaddafi treatment.
Well, look, I think, though, that we do have the precedent has been set that whether you, and we learned when it came to Gaddafi that there was actually a nuclear program and all kinds of things we didn't know, and of course because we're all being lied to. The UN has been ineffectual. We're it. We are the premier power, and this is about not just saving ourselves, but there are 200,000 North Koreans in concentration camps in North Korea. This is a human rights issue, but we do have the precedent where we can get someone to get rid of their weapons of mass destruction, as you said. It is not unprecedented, and by the way, even if it was, this nation does unprecedented things all the time and either will convince lunatics to give up, and China's helpful now. China's actually said if North Korea strikes first, you are on your own. That is a gift. And I think that shows that they understand that Donald Trump is serious, that the American people understand what's at stake here, despite the rhetoric that we're hearing, awful rhetoric, not supporting the president, casting him as shockingly as the aggressor. No one around the world really believes that.
I want to bring up something else you said recently, Tammy, because you recently wrote an article on, quote, the smug bigotry of Trump haters where you highlight the, quote, thinly veiled contempt of those unlike society's all-knowing benefactors. And the poster boy for this behaviour, of course, is Jim Acosta and his cluelessness while debating Stephen Miller last week on immigration.
Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. And it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say...
It sounds like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said. And for you, that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting.
Now, if you're Kim Jong-un threatening to turn the United States into a lump of jelly, Jim Acosta, after Stephen Miller was through with it.
Perfect example of Michael Gerson, speechwriter for President Reagan's phrase of the soft bigotry of low expectations. First, of course, there are 54 countries that have English as their primary language.
That's right.
But this is this dynamic where, like Acosta, even if you don't speak English, that somehow if you're disenfranchised or disadvantaged or poor, that you're just too dumb to be able to handle any kind of expectations. That is outrageous. It's what the left has always expected of people. And we see it also, of course, in the universities here. We saw, of course, a lot of bigotry coming out about West Virginia after the Trump rally on Twitter.
Yeah, Stu Rothenberg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, that in West Virginia, people also don't speak English and can't, you know, make a living. The fact of the matter is, this is that from the high tower looking down on people who they just think can't handle it because they didn't go to Ivy League schools, or maybe they don't even have a college degree. But considering the condition of Washington, I think that maybe it's the college degree is the problem these days.
But what's fascinating to me is that they got the election wrong last year, which you think might occasion a certain modesty in this group of people. And instead they're going around like the slightly idiotic third son of a middle European Grand Duke who doesn't actually get why the snarling peasants outside the castle gates are in a bad mood.
Yeah, it is the ultimate in self-protection and in disconnection. They really truly believe that Americans are just hamsters that need to be kept in the wheel, and there's no way that the hamsters actually figured out how to get out of the cage.
No.
That would be too shocking. So this is also why the country's a mess after 8 years. But Americans, and how much I love us, despite all of this for so long, we've decided the country is worth saving, that we don't like them because of the way what they think of us, but really we think now mostly of the country. Now it's not about partisan fights. No. We are fighting now for the future and for the country, and that's why we'll win.
The hamster is off the wheel, and he's mad as hell.
Out of the cage.
Tammy, thanks. We were in the